Hello, everyone. This is Frank Tamora, giving you updates connecting Bible prophecy with current events. Please go over to my website, BibleProphecyMan.com, and when you're there, you'll find a link at the top. That link is a link to my book, The Last Chronicles of Planet Earth, of which you can get all types of information, documentation showing how our generation is going in to the last period that Jesus talked about in the book of Revelation, the last 7 years before Jesus actually comes back to begin his rule in Jerusalem. Now, in Matthew chapter 24, which I'm at right now, and I'm just going to center right here for now, because in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus lists all of the last day signs that will take place all at the same time in one generation. And that generation is the generation who saw the rebirth of the nation of Israel. But notice in verse 8 it says, all this is just the start of the birth pangs. So there's a generation who saw Israel be born again. A generation would see all of the signs all at the same time. And these would be the birth pang signs, letting us know that we're beginning, and eventually we're going to end up in the 7 year period that Jesus talked about in the book of Revelation. Because we see these birth pangs that are intensifying, we know that this generation is speeding very, very quickly to the final days that Jesus talked about on that mount. Anyone who has read the Bible from Genesis to the Revelation would understand how close we are to the end days. How close we are to actually seeing the coming of the Son of Man as he was warning his disciples. So to begin with, I want to center on some prophecies that the Lord gave to us, this generation, and we're seeing those birth pangs of the heat, extreme heat, intensity from the sun, and the fires that he talked about coming in the last days generation. Some of the effects of the intense heat that we're seeing that are linked to other prophecies as well. So with that, let's begin with a portion of the book of Revelation. Jesus gives us warning about the sun, what was going to happen in the last days. That specific generation who would be destined to go into the tribulation period. And in Revelation chapter 7, verse 16, the Lord points out some very specific events that are going to be taking place on an unrepentant generation. In Revelation chapter 7, verse 16, he says this, never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat upon them or any scorching heat. So what this is telling us is that the people during the tribulation period, and we're seeing the birth pangs of it, are definitely going to hunger during that period. And they're going to be thirsty. And one of the reasons why we know that is because the sun, the effects of the sun and the scorching heat that the sun will be pouring down on this planet, it's going to dry up a large portion of the drinking water. And as that happens, obviously the crops are going to be affected as well. So people will go into famine, which is another one of those signs that the Lord revealed to us. Now, this isn't the only place where the Lord reveals to us what was going to happen concerning fire and the sun. Take a look at this in Revelation chapter 16, verse 8. The fourth angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and the sun was given power to scorch people with fire. So two different places the Lord reveals to us that there was going to be intense heat coming down upon the people and planet Earth. And those people who reject the message of Jesus Christ now, who refuse the salvation and the grace that God has given to us by his Son that was his blood shed on that cross, those people who reject Jesus will be cast into the tribulation period and face every one of the signs that Jesus warns people about. And obviously, the scorching heat and the sun and the fires are part of the last days scenario. Now, anyone who receives the message of Jesus Christ and is ready, abiding in Jesus Christ, when the rapture takes place, the Lord is going to remove his people out of this planet. They will be going into the kingdom of the Lord for 7 years. And for 7 years, all hell is going to break out on this planet. But the last part of that tribulation period, which will be 3.5 years, it's also called Jacob's trouble, that's when the wrath of God is fully poured out on this unrepenting world. So if you're one of the people that reject the message of Jesus Christ, you reject the work that he did for us on that cross, get ready to live through some horrific times. And those people who reject the message now that are cast into the tribulation period, and then during that period they do receive Jesus Christ and they reject the mark of the beast, obviously we know that they'll be going through part of this tribulation. They will have to face these plagues, the bowls that the Lord has put down on this earth and the people on the earth. And it will be those people who are thirsty, who are hungry, and who are facing the scorching heat. But at least as they reject the Antichrist and his mark, and they die for Jesus Christ, they will enter into the kingdom of God. They would have come out of this horrific time. And so the Lord would say, never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat upon them, nor any scorching heat, because that's exactly what they went through. Our generation is faced with record-breaking heat almost every single year. Our generation is now watching forest fires burn out of control in many parts of the world because of the dryness in our forest, because of the intense heat that's being poured down. These signs of the birth pangs that Jesus talked about. Let's take a look at some of the documentation showing us these birth pangs that the Lord warns about.
There's news to report tonight about the weather and climate change. Government scientists said today that 2006 will most likely be the third warmest year on record here in the U.S. and a record-setting year for wildfires because of the increased heat, they say, and drought. In a separate report, England's weather service said this year is on track to be the 6th hottest on record around the globe.
NASA says 2007 was the second warmest year in a century, and there's more to come. This computer animation shows documented warming trends compiled by scientists at the agency's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, that's in New York. They found the highest warming in 2007 occurred in the Arctic. Another study confirmed that Arctic sea ice is at a record low, which is consistent with the warming trend. NASA scientists expect that a new record global temperature will be set within the next 3 years.
Wow.
NASA gives us information about what happened around the globe in 2008. Although 2008 was the coolest year of the decade, due to strong cooling of the tropical Pacific Ocean, 2009 saw a return to the near record global temperatures. The past year was only a fraction of a degree cooler than 2005, the warmest year on record, and tied with the cluster of other years, 1998, 2002, 2003, 2006, and 2007, as the second warmest year since record keeping began. In other words, 2008, although it did cool down because of El Nino, it still didn't cool down as much as it should, and it continued the trend of the rising temperatures.
Climate scientists at NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies, or GISS, just released a new analysis of global average temperatures, showing that 2009 was tied as the second warmest year ever recorded. And looking just at the southern hemisphere, 2009 even broke the record as the warmest year ever in this half of the world. In fact, 2009 was virtually tied with 5 other recent years in its position as second warmest on record: 1998, 2002, 2003, 2006, and 2007. and it was only a fraction of a percent cooler than the warmest year, 2005. Yet when looking at global temperatures over a longer time frame, these scientists found a persistent warming trend over the past 3 decades, with the average global temperature increasing by roughly 1/3 of a degree Fahrenheit per decade. This past decade, from 2000 to 2009, was the warmest yet. And when looking back all the way to 1880, the year when precise temperature record-keeping began, scientists observed about a 1.5 degree Fahrenheit rise in global temperature.
There are already beginning to be effects of 1 or 2 degrees warming, and if we get 5 or 10 degrees warming several decades downstream, there will be huge effects.
GISS scientists came to these results after analyzing information from 3 sources: data from more than 1,000 weather stations around the globe, satellite observations of sea surface temperature, and measurements from Antarctic research stations. So what's the cause of this long-term warming trend? While there are several natural processes that can cause subtle climate warming or cooling, like variations in solar activity, fluctuations in ocean currents, and volcanic eruptions, climate scientists believe that the rising levels of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are the dominant factor driving the rise.
Data from the World Meteorological Organization shows that 2010 may become the warmest year on record globally. Meteorologist Andrew Tutt joins us now with more. Andrew?
Yeah, Patrick, through October, 2010 is on pace to get that record. Of course, we still have to get through December, and all the data does have to be collaborated. And what it is taking into account is land temperatures globally and also sea surface temperatures. The way things do stand right now, 1998 is the warmest year on record. 2005 is second on the list. And keep these years in mind. We're going to compare this now to the warmest years in northeast Wisconsin. As you can see, 1998 actually number 2 on the list. 2005 not on the list, it's somewhere around 14. Number 1, 1931, the warmest year on record here in Green Bay. 2007, number 5 on the list. And if we see average temperatures through December, 2010 will be the 7th warmest year on record. So let's break it down by decades too, and this is how it goes. The warmest decade on record, the 1930s, followed by the 2000s. Number 3 was the 1940s.
Welcome back to our live coverage of the United Nations Climate Talks here in South Africa. I'm delighted to say that we've been joined by Jerry Lengwasa of the World Meteorological Organization. Jerry, your organisation tracks the state of the climate, and I know you bring out an annual report each year looking at the state of the climate. So where are we at?
Right. Where we are, thanks first of all for having me join you and the audience. Where we are, the annual statement, of course, we are not through the year yet, so it's a provisional statement which takes account of the first 10 months of 2011. And so far, for temperatures, there's a clear indication that it is about 0.45 degrees above normal, which means, and the norm is 14 degrees C of global average temperatures if you start counting in 1970s. So we are above that. However, this year is cooler than 2010, even though it is cooler because of the effect of La Nina. Now, La Nina is the opposite of El Nino, which probably is much more well known as a climate indicator, where the ocean areas along the coast of South America, on the western side of South America, tend to change between warm and cool. The El Nino tends to be warmer ocean temperatures. That has impacts globally on different weather patterns through the world. Cooler patterns, the La Nina tends to have a cooling effect over the ocean. So what we have noticed, though, is that even though we've had the cooling impact of the La Nina, it is still, temperatures are still higher than they have been in any other La Nina year in the past. So this year, 2011, provisionally, still counts as most likely the 10th highest ranking year in terms of temperatures in the world.
And how long have these temperatures been tracked? And you know, where are the hot years coming? If we were to spread them out across a graph, where would you see the warmer years?
The warmest years actually have occurred in the last decade, between 2000 and 1997 and present. The 13 warmest years have occurred in the last 15 years, starting in just after 2000. So, and the record-breaking year was 2010. We have done a survey of 100 members out of 100 countries, out of 189 countries. None of those countries have recorded temperatures lower than their normal temperatures over the last decade. All of them without fail.
2012, the hottest year on record in the United States. Usually the temperature differences from year to year are measured in fractions of a degree. Last year, though, the 55.3 degree average demolished the previous record set in 1998 by a full degree Fahrenheit. If this doesn't sound impressive, let's look at the number of record highs versus the number of record lows. Over 34,000 record high temperatures set across the country in 2012 compared to only 6,600 record lows, according to a count maintained by meteorologist from the Weather Channel, Guy Walton. The ratio used to be in balance as recently as the 1970s, where each year there would be about the same number of new highs set as new lows. However, it's been completely out of whack, particularly in the last year.
And finally, not that we didn't know, but a report seals it, the world is getting warmer. According to an annual State of the Climate report, which observes weather events and scientific data collected over the year, 2013 was one of the top 10 hottest years on record, observing historic highs in greenhouse gas emissions, rise in sea surface temperatures, and ice melts in both the Arctic and the Antarctic. Australia experienced its warmest year on record, followed by Argentina and New Zealand, which had their second and third warmest, respectively.
2014 was the hottest year on record. The finding was announced today in a new report from NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies in New York. Each year, the institute produces a global temperature analysis using readings from weather stations around the world. The map seen here shows long-term changes in Earth's temperature compared to a 30-year baseline. Red, orange, and yellow are warmer areas. Blue is colder. Since temperature records began in 1880, the global average has increased by 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit.
And that might not seem very much, but in terms of the climate, it's actually quite a big deal.
Scientists expect global and regional fluctuations in temperature from year to year due to changing weather patterns. In 2014, the Midwestern US experienced a cold winter, but parts of Western US hit record high temperatures. When looking at decades worth of data, the ranking of 2014 as the hottest year reinforces the long-term trend of rising global temperatures, a trend driven by the increase of carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere.
Carbon dioxide levels are increasing because we're taking carbon out of the ground, mainly as coal, oil, or as natural gas, and we're burning it. When you burn carbon, you produce carbon dioxide, which contributes to the planet's greenhouse effect. And as we continue to increase that, we're going to continue to see warming and more records being broken, not every year, but on a pretty regular basis.
Well, record shows 2015 was the warmest year on record, both on land and at sea. We also saw more tropical storms than 3 decades ago, and greenhouse gas reached alarming levels. Now, all this leading to stronger and more devastating natural disasters. What's all the more worrisome, however, is that 2015 was only a prelude to what's to come this year. Kim Hye-sung reports.
2015 was the hottest year since climate records began. According to the State of the Climate report by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration released on Wednesday, last year was the first time that Earth's surface temperature exceeded those from the early and mid-19th century by more than 1 degree Celsius. The report said the higher temperature was due to a combination of long-term climate change and a strong El Niño weather pattern. While 2015 saw the strongest El Niño in more than 50 years, the phenomenon was a short-term trigger to a long-term global warming caused by human activity. Concentration of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide levels at Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii exceeded 400 parts per million for the first time. Sea levels also rised about 70 millimeters higher than the 1993 average when detailed measurements first began. And the rapid changes in the climate led to extreme weather events in 2015. There were 101 recorded tropical cyclones last year, 20 more than the annual average from 1981 to 2010. In June last year, a severe heat wave claimed over 1,300 lives in Pakistan, and 12 countries, including Russia and China, saw unusually high annual average temperatures. But what is more troubling about the report is that El Niño is likely to have an even greater impact on global surface temperatures this year. Already, according to NASA, the Earth's surface temperatures and Arctic sea ice extent have broken numerous records through the first half of 2016. And the newly released climate report adds to increasing evidence demonstrating that unless immediate action is taken to address climate change, our planet will continue on a path leading to a very grim future.
A planet that seems fragile from space. The sun descends on a world that is gradually getting warmer. A provisional assessment by the UN's World Meteorological Organization shows that this year is set to be the hottest recorded globally in recent times.
It's likely that we will reach this year 1.2 degree warming level, and we are going to a bit the wrong direction if we think of this 1.5 degree warming level, which was agreed last year in Paris.
Christ talked about the heat of the earth being poured out from the sun. And you've seen every single year now that those temperatures are going up. Records are being broken. Now, as we enter 2017, the trend continues. The birth pangs continue. Listen to this.
In 2016, it became stunningly clear that we are warming the climate and there are dire consequences. I'm in a tiny village in Alaska about 30 miles from the Arctic Circle, and I'm sure that it looks cold out here, but locals are actually complaining about the heat. The Arctic is warming about twice as fast as the rest of the planet, and in mid-November, this entire region was 35 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. It's not just here. This is happening all around the world, and 2016 is actually expected to be the hottest year on record. This spring, a drought in India was so intense that it reportedly led some farmers to commit suicide. In May, monster wildfires forced 88,000 people in Canada to flee. In July, a city in Kuwait hit a stunning 129 degrees Fahrenheit, or 54 Celsius. That month was named the hottest ever, until August tied it. Scientists are getting better at tying these events to us. A flood in Louisiana killed 13 people in August. Scientists say that event was made 40% more likely because of climate change. Here in Shishmaref, locals voted that same month to abandon their village, which their ancestors have lived in for 400 years. The permafrost is melting and the coast is crumbling. Are we causing all of the bad weather? No. But we are burning fossil fuels, which is heating up the planet, and that puts our fingerprints on the extreme weather more than ever before.
Some new findings about the world's climate. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the planet experienced its second warmest April on record. And 2017 is the second warmest year to date. Last month also saw record low sea ice in the Arctic and Antarctic. Ahira Sanchez-Lugo is a climatologist at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. She joins us on the phone from Asheville, North Carolina. Ahira, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Tell us what is most significant about this in your estimation.
Yes, well, the most significant thing is that we've continued seeing warmth across the globe. 2016 was record warm, but it was boosted mainly because of the El Niño, the moderate to strong El Niño that was present across the central and eastern tropical Pacific Ocean. 2017, what makes it interesting is that there is no El Niño present. There are ENSO neutral conditions, meaning no El Niño, no La Niña. So, and with all that, it's really, really warm. It was, as you said, the second highest. And our period of record goes back to 1880, so there's 138 years of record. So that means that the temperature for April in 2017 surpassed 136 of those temperature records. Only 2016 surpassed, and because of the strong El Nino that was present during the start of the year, and 2016 was ahead of 2017 by 0.31 degrees Fahrenheit.
So remind us again here, just because you're dealing without it this year, some more of the effects of El Nino from last year and other years.
Well, El Nino not only impacts the weather patterns across the globe, but we've tended to see that the global temperature records tend to increase. The temperatures for the globe tend to be higher when there's an El Nino present compared to those years that there is no El Nino. Or in the presence of La Nina. La Nina is the opposite of El Nino, where we see unusually cool temperatures across the central and eastern tropical Pacific Ocean.
Ahira, what else did you find significant about this?
For this month was extremely, there were across all land and oceans, the vast majority, of course, had warmer than average temperatures. There were some areas, specifically across the land and oceans, that did see cooler than average conditions. However, there were some areas that experienced record warmth. What we didn't see was no land areas or no ocean areas experienced record cold temperatures.
And can you talk a little bit more about the record low sea ice in both the Arctic and Antarctic?
Yes, I can talk about how for the Arctic sea ice, we are now entering what we call a decline because it's the northern hemisphere summer. So now the Arctic sea ice starts to shrink. But what we've been seeing for the last, I want to say, 3 consecutive months, the Arctic sea ice extent has been shrinking, and it has been the lowest on record. And records go back to 1979. And the same is true for the Antarctic. The Antarctic for the last several months has been record low, but for April was second lowest on record.
That last report was produced out in May. Now let's go to July 18th, 2017, from the Climate Center. At midpoint, 2017 is second hottest year on record. So as we advance into 2017, so are the heat record. At the halfway point of the year, 2017 remains the second hottest year to date. A surprise given the demise of the El Nino that helped boost temperatures to record levels last year. The continued near record warmth is a marker of just how much global temperatures have risen thanks to the greenhouse gases accumulating from the fossil fuel use. Down in the article it says, the odds are good that 2017 will stay in second place through the end of the year, and it is even more likely that it will remain in at least the top 3 hottest years. I hope that the documentation that you're seeing will encourage you to begin watching these events, but more than that, begin reading the scriptures and getting very, very close to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because we're closing in on the final days that Jesus Christ said would come.
We know that this ice shelf existed for at least 12,000 years. In 2002, 2/3 of it collapsed in less than 6 weeks. In the intervening period between 2002 and now, the remaining part of Larsen B has also been weakening very, very quickly. We expect it will not last for more than a few years to come. This will undoubtedly affect sea level rise by putting more ice into the ocean. Now we have this rare opportunity of this ice shelf destabilizing and eventually collapsing in front of our eyes. And that will give us incredibly valuable lessons that we could use to understand what might be happening elsewhere in the future. It is certainly a warning. The conclusion is inescapable.
There's no question that the glacier heavyweights are Greenland and Antarctica. However, what's interesting is the amount that the Alaskan glaciers are contributing to sea level rise. More than 99% of the world's ice is presently contained in Antarctica and Greenland. However, of all the water contributed to the oceans by glacier ice melting in the last decade or so, something like 9% is thought to have come from the Alaskan glaciers. What that means is that our glaciers are melting fast. Coastal Alaska, where most of our big glaciers exist, is not really that cold of a place. Our biggest glaciers owe their presence not primarily to this place being super cold, but to it being really snowy. And so it doesn't take a lot of warming to either melt those glaciers faster or, importantly, change a lot of the snowfall into rain. And by starving a glacier of snowfall during rain events, you contribute to its shrinkage.
A crack more than 120 miles long on the east side of the Antarctic Peninsula, finally breaking off, creating a spectacular iceberg weighing more than 1 trillion metric tons, roughly the size of Delaware.
It's one of the largest icebergs in human history.
UCLA professor Aradhana Tripathi has spent her career studying Antarctic ice, traveling to the very peninsula where the ice shelf called Larsen C broke off. Professor Tripathi has seen 2 other big sections of the peninsula break off and dissolve. The first in 1995 and then another in 2002. She watched as this crack grew for years, caught off guard that this break happened so soon. What this latest break means is something scientists aren't yet agreed on. Antarctica, the coldest place on Earth, is a continent covered in ice, and icebergs have been breaking away from ice shelves for millions of years. But at the end of the 20th century, the peninsula was one of the fastest warming places on the planet. That warming has slowed or reversed slightly in this century.
You learn all of this just from samples of ice. You learn that from samples of ice and samples of rock.
This geochemist says the overall trends in the Arctic point to global warming.
The fact that we've had 7 out of the 12 ice shelves on Antarctica collapse in the last few decades, and this one appears to be ready to go with the breaking off of this major iceberg, that it's hard to attribute to anything else.
For now, scientists will track the new iceberg to see if and when it melts. And maps, they'll have to be redrawn for the ever-changing geography in Antarctica. Kyung La, CNN, Los Angeles.
I think one of the best ways to see the correlation between the prophecy that Jesus gave to us about the intense heat from the sun and the fires burning in the last days on this planet is to take a look at what's been happening to the coldest part of our world, Antarctica, the glaciers. And the best way to do this is when you see these glaciers personally and you look at the before and after pictures, what they look like, and you see the amount of ice dissipating over the years, you'll get a better idea that our planet is definitely warming up. CBS has a line of pictures before and after of the different glaciers. Let's take a look at the article entitled Vanishing Glaciers of Alaska. And you notice that in the right-hand side of the picture, it'll give you the name of the glacier. And as we make our way through the pictures, you'll also see the dates. Watch this. In this photo, you'll see the 1914. This is what it looked like. The NOAA took this, the Portage Glacier in Alaska, and also at that same year, 1914, was the Bern Glacier. You see the arrows where they were. This was that Bern Glacier in 1914. And now we go to July 2013. This is where the Burns Glacier used to be. You see it here, and it's gone. Now for the Portage Glacier, July the same year, 2013. You can see that glacier ran all the way down here and up in here. And now you can see that it's all water down here. All this has retreated. Let's take a look at the Pasters Glacier, 1875. And here it is in 2004. You'll see that there's quite a difference between 1875 and 2004.
So now that you have seen what's been happening as I chronologically give you information over the years, I want to bring you now up to speed, up to 2020, the most current news that we have about these signs that Jesus is talking about the droughts and the intensity of the sun and so forth. Okay, so let's take a look at our first article that came out March 21st, 2020. Yucatan Peninsula heading into worst drought since 1986. Mexico. The drought situation in the Yucatan Peninsula in 2020 is shaping to be the worst in the past 34 years. 3 years of below average rainfall are emerging, and groundwater levels are already plummeting to minimum levels, making this year's drought projections similar to major droughts that occurred in 1986 and 1962. So as we read this, keep in mind those birth pangs that Jesus said, because they would come and they would go. But when they came back, it would be worse than previously, and that's what we're seeing here. Aside from the devastating consequences of a dry period, including extraction of water for agricultural use and human consumption, wildfires are also at high risk, with some of it already started. February to May in the Yucatan's dry season, the time when farmers traditionally burn and clear fields for crops. However, the situation also an urban crisis. So we're going to drop down right here and we'll begin right there. Everything indicates that the 2020 dry season will be the strongest since 1986, Montalvo said, adding that the situation is of utmost significance considering that this year's dry spell ties in with that of 2019 and part of 2018 when the rainfall was less than average. 3 years of below average rainfall are emerging and groundwater levels are already plummeting to minimal levels. The meteorologist, however, said the cause is still unknown. What is causing it? We don't know. The explanation may be a cycle that is repeating itself because of the atmosphere lives cycles. So you talk about some weird things that are taking place in the next paragraph. It could be the dry descending air that is dominating and the high pressures that came this year long before time, arriving at the end of January when they normally do so in late March or early April, and these conditions have brought the drought ahead of time, he added. Montalvo also emulated signs that the worst of the situation is coming. First, the Maculus trees bloomed in February instead of in March as what is normal. Also, the saber trees bore fruit prematurely. Moreover, ants have been bringing food to their nest, which is an omen that a very severe drought is coming, and they are stocking up, he stated. So when we listen to the Lord talk about scorching the earth, and there hasn't been too much news about the depletion of the ozone layer, which, if the depletion continues, it most definitely can heat up this planet. Now, on September 17th of 2003, the USA Today told us the ozone hole over the Antarctic this year has reached the record size of 10.8 million square miles set 3 years ago, the United Nations Weather Organization said. Now, in 2005 was much the same. On January 31st, 2005, MSNBC writes, the ozone layer over the Arctic has thinned due to colder than normal temperatures, and large-scale losses are likely if the cold conditions continue, a European research group reported. 7 months after the MSNBC report, on January 31st, 2005, the Times of India reported this news from Geneva. This year's seasonal ozone hole over Antarctica was the third largest on record, October 18, 2005. In 2006, the NASA News has some more alarming news. This is what NASA wrote. On September 24th, the ozone hole covered an area of 11.4 million square miles, matching a single-day record area previously observed on September the 9th of 2000. The new record set in 2006, by contrast, was for the largest average area over an 11-day period, indicating that the hole stayed longer than it ever has before. The picture below is from the NASA files taken in 2006, which are public domain. The dark area is the massive ozone hole. The ozone hole was still growing as you will see from the September 12th, 2011 photo. The hole began to form in mid-August, and by mid-September had reached an area of around 25 million square kilometers, larger than the average for the last decade, and remained near this size into early October. NASA image and news courtesy Ozone Hole Watch, September the 12th of 2011. So now I'm going to take you to some news, March 18th of 2020. Rare, unusual, large ozone hole develops over the Arctic Canadian region. Underneath it says, a huge area, sustained ozone depletion has developed over the Arctic Canadian region. Too late for the winter season, too early for spring, and unusually strong for the northern hemisphere. The ozone layer is a natural layer of protective gas in the upper atmosphere that shields living things on Earth from harmful ultraviolet radiation from the sun. So in the book of Revelation, when it says it's going to scorch people and there's going to be fire, and we see events like what we're seeing with these ozone holes that are opening up, they're closing, and then they open up and they get bigger and they get worse, we should definitely pay attention to what's happening in our atmosphere. In the past days, weeks, we have been monitoring onset of unusually strong ozone depletion over the North Polar regions, severe weather Europe, SWE meteorologists noted. We already had a big drop in the minimum ozone values in late November 2019 and January 2020 due to the development of a mini ozone hole over northern Europe. So you see this really good picture of the ozone hole that they're talking about in this article. So I'm going to scroll down. You can see how this ozone hole has developed in this video below. Watch this. And it begins November the 1st of 2019. You can see it's starting to take shape there. So you see how big it got as of March 16th of 2020. Now if you'd like, go over to my website. I'll leave the link there, but you could read the whole entire article. I'm just going to end it with this. A minimum ozone graph also shows two powerful low spikes in late November and January, but these were short-lived events that likely happens each year during the cold season. What really got our attention was the overall reduction of ozone in early March, when the value should actually be going up slowly, said SWE. Something was off, and this time it was not just a quick low spike from a mini ozone hole, but a proper ozone destruction process. So if the Lord tells us and shows us events are going to get hotter and hotter the closer we get to the second coming, and we see these conditions, as I said, let's be diligent and prepare ourselves and get ready for what is actually going to reach its max during the tribulation period. And we're seeing year by year, we're getting record heat waves that are coming out. Look at Science Alert, this article. Congratulations, you just survived the 5 hottest years on record. This came out February the 7th of 2019. 5 different organizations that track temperatures have all come to this conclusion. 2018 ranked among the 5 warmest years on record, landing in 4th place. It's the record no one wanted to win. 2019 was the second hottest year on record, government scientists confirmed yesterday, January 15th. That's according to 2 separate analyses, one conducted by NASA and one by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. Each study compared 2019 Earth temperatures data with scientists' historical records, which begin in 1880. Of those 140 years, only 2016 was warmer than last year, The analysis also show that the 5 hottest years on record have been the 5 years beginning in 2015. So you'll see there's a steady progress of what we're seeing. Events of birth paying signs getting worse as the years go by. So as you can see, as I'm looking with you over the years, how the temperatures are definitely indicating you should be paying attention to the warnings of Jesus Christ. And as our planet, for whatever reason, gets hotter and hotter, we're seeing glaciers melt. So there you have it. So if Christ prophesies that we're going to have droughts, we're going to have famines, we're going to have issues with the drinking water in the last days, we're going to see intense heat. And you see articles like the one that I'm showing you right here about the droughts and how they're getting worse. If you keep rejecting these signs that the Lord is showing us, after all, He told us to keep on the watch. Why did He say that? Because if you knew what to look for and you knew what the Bible said, as you look upon the news, you would make the connection that you yourself would be able to connect the dots instead of me connecting the dots for you, because you would know what the Bible said, you would know the warnings of Jesus Christ, and you would know the specific detailed information that He gave to us about what signs we should be looking for. And the signs of the fires, the droughts, the water issues, the intensity of the heat scorching this planet and people in the last days should be taken seriously by Jesus Christ. Now, please, will this ozone hole that we're seeing right now close up again? It's a possibility. I'm not going to write that off. But when it comes back, will it be worse? You'll never know unless you keep on the watch. But here's a fact. At the end of the day, everything that Jesus warned about in the prophecies that I showed you before I started this video are going to take place just the way He prophesied it. And the pinnacle point for these prophecies are going to take place during that tribulation period, where the wrath of God is poured out upon an unrighteous world. You could be righteous with Jesus Christ today by asking Jesus into your life, recognizing that the Messiah Himself came and lived among people on this planet. He decided to go to the cross and to take the sins of the world on Himself and remove those sins from anybody who would receive the blood that He shed on that cross for us, so that we may go into fellowship and live with the Messiah forever in His kingdom. Without that blood, without the atonement of His blood on you, there's no rebirth, and you cannot enter into the kingdom of God. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. It's a hard phrase to take in, but it's the truth. And you definitely do not want to find out that you made the biggest mistake in not just this life, but the life after, because without receiving Jesus, there is eternity away from God. And Jesus talked about hell more than anybody else in the Bible, where He said there's wailing and gnashing of teeth. And once you're there, you never get out. And the Lord is extending His graciousness towards us by giving us all that we need to know before He comes for us. Listen to what the Lord says. Come to Him, please. Don't be caught as an unbeliever, as Satan wants you to be, so that you cannot enter into His kingdom. Jesus doesn't want any to perish, but He has given everybody that free choice to make the right choice. This is Frank DeMore with the End Times Research Ministry and also BibleProphecyMan.com. God bless. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll never ask you for a dime. That's not what this ministry is about. You can get my book today for free by going over to my website.